Hey YouTube, John here again, and today we're back down on the bench with the X6 Tarantula. Our goal today is to try to finally finish the FPV setup for this X6 Tarantula. For those of you who haven't seen the first video, I'll put a link to it down below. Definitely go back and check that one out first. But our ultimate goal here is to use the 686G FPV setup on the X6 Tarantula. So if you have both quadcopters, you can fly them both FPV. Now, since the last video, I have tried a different method to get the camera to power up properly. If you remember right, the Tarantula camera output was 5 volts, and that was too much for the 686G's camera. The camera's looking for 4.2 to 3.7, somewhere around there. So, I listened to a bunch of comments, great comments. I appreciate everyone commenting on this video. I appreciate all the help. One of the popular ideas was to use the forward voltage drop on a diode to drop the voltage. So I did try that. I'll put a couple shots here to show you what I did. Unfortunately, what I found is that the 686G camera actually draws about 170, 160 milliamps more than the Tarantula camera. And when you throw the diode in line, that adds another 100 milliamps. So we were around 400 milliamps with the 686G camera with the diode in line, compared to about 130 milliamps with the Tarantula stock camera. And what we found is that the camera would stay on for about 30 seconds and then just fade out. And we were actually losing the voltage from the Tarantula, so it was overheating or just overworking the voltage regulator in the Tarantula. So unfortunately, that setup's not going to work. So the final setup that I've kind of locked down on, that I'm pretty sure is going to work, again, you know, a lot of comments have really helped, is to power off the balance plug. Now at first I was reluctant to power off the balance plug because, you know, I must have had a brain fade or something, but I was thinking I was going to have to pull off of just one cell in the battery pack, and I really didn't want to do that. I really didn't want to drain one battery cell. And then a viewer commented, why not just run the cells in parallel? Brilliant idea, super simple, and I don't know why I didn't think of it, but to the guy who commented that, I really appreciate it. So basically what we're going to do here is we have a 3-pin JST connector right here. This is the balance plug. Black is ground, and we have 2 power feeds right here. And what I've done is I've purchased a couple sets of these JST 3-pin pigtails. And I found that most manufacturers are only selling the female version, which obviously isn't going to work here. But most of them do include the male PCB mount. So what my plan is to just use these wires here and solder them to the male end, and that way we'll have a male pigtail. So I'm going to start by doing that, and then we're going to go from there. So let's go ahead and solder these together. So just to give you a better idea as to what I've done here, I just took that male PCB connection and just soldered the wires right here on the end of it, and I'll just throw some heat shrink over that, and we'll have ourselves a male pigtail. And there's a close-up of the finished pigtail after being heat shrunk. So we'll go ahead and we'll put this thing in line. So I guess this is my own ignorance coming in here, but I had assumed that the balance plug on a LiPo, where it's a 2-cell LiPo, would be ground wire attached to both batteries, the power wire for one battery, and the power wire for the other battery. That way each cell can be brought to the proper voltage. Further inspection or investigation reveals, here's ground, 4.17, which is what I expected to find. But if we go to the second cable here, we have 8.36. That's the total voltage of the pack. So I don't know if the ground is already wired in series, or I don't understand how that works, how you're balancing both batteries. So I guess I need to do some research on balance charging and LiPos in general. But I think we're going to have to just wind up powering it off of this center plug here. which isn't what I wanted to do, but we're going to have to do it that way. And in the meantime, I'm either going to take this apart or we're going to do some research online. So hang tight. Okay, so we're doing a little bit of research here, and what I found is this website is called the On30 Guy, and basically this discusses making your own 2-cell lipo pack, but more importantly, it gives us a diagram of the lipo pack, and we can see that if we look at the 3-pin JST for the balance port, we have our ground wire going to the first pin, and then right here, here's our batteries in series. So we're going from the positive lead of the first wire, the first battery, out to our JST. So this is why we're getting the 3.7 volts across these two terminals, because then we're coming over and we're in series. So now when we measure this one, we're going to get double the voltage. We're going to get the total voltage of the pack. It explains a lot. It still kind of left me a little confused about how balance charges worked. And what I found is this website, and I'll put the links down below if you want to read through this. And this is basically an RC helicopter website, but this gentleman did an awesome write-up on how battery packs work, different lipo designs, how balance charges work. So I'll put a link to that down below as well if you want to read up on how this stuff operates. So now that we have a better idea as to how it works, I think we will just draw off the first pack and see how it works out, and we'll see what happens. So let's get back down to the bench. Okay, so here's the camera harness all done. You can see we got our male 3-pin JST to go on the balance plug. We have 2 wires coming from the balance plug to the camera itself to power it. And then here's the 4-pin JST coming off of the quadcopter. And the 2 wires, one for still shot, one for camera, one for video, sorry, also going to the camera. So that will give us camera control, camera power at the proper voltage. So let's get this assembled on the quadcopter and we'll give it a try. So there it is. There's a 686G camera mounted on the X6 Tarantula. And the 686G and the Tarantula have the same exact mounting brackets, so it actually did clip right into the stock anti-vibration mount. What I have going on here is my zip tie anti-vibration mount, which uses the stock base plate, so you can just clip it right in. The only reason this strap is here underneath it, that's the strap that holds the battery in, and I wound up making this harness way too long. So I just kind of wrapped it around the battery and the base plate, and then wrapped it one more time around the camera so I had somewhere to tuck all these wires into. So definitely keep that in mind if you're going to do this. You know, I just kind of threw it together. I didn't really pay attention to wire length. I thought I was going to need a lot more than I really did. And then here's the back of it. So obviously here's the wires for the quadcopter itself, and then here's the wire for the balance plug. And I kind of glazed over the whole balance plug harness thing. I didn't really want to bore anybody with the soldering and everything. There's plenty of soldering tutorials and how to solder and all that. So what I'll do is I'm going to take a still shot of the harness and I'll put it right here, and everything will be labeled. That way you can just pause the screen, write it down, take a screen cap, whatever you want to do, and use that as your baseline on how to make the harness. I figured that would be a lot easier to do it that way. But other than that, I think the only thing left to do is take this thing for a flight and see how it works. You're definitely going to have to remember, if you do this setup, to unplug the camera every time you're done, because it will draw the battery. And the only thing I did do is I shortened the front zip tie here on my mount just to pitch the camera up a little bit. That way when it's tipping down in flight, the camera will still be looking forward. I think that about covers everything. So, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. Let's get this thing up in the air and check it out. Alright, we're going to go for our maiden flight. We have the battery hooked up to the camera and to the quadcopter. Transmitter on. We have an FPV signal. We'll bind it. Now I already saw there's a lot of static here with the transmitter bound to the quadcopter. I don't know what that's all about. That's kind of weird. But anyways, let's take this thing up for a flight. We'll start recording. There's definitely a lot more static than you would typically find with the 686G. I don't know if this is just like interference from the motors or what this is, but it makes it actually very difficult to fly. I'm not really happy with that. And it also looks like there's a lot of jello in the picture. So not super thrilled with this result at this point. Definitely not. Oh, almost one up in the tree there. And we're down. Alright, so we're back down here in the garage. All in all, I would say it was a success. I saw a few things I didn't like. There was a lot of static in the screen. I think it was just interference from the motors or something, but there was a lot of static. Way more than what I typically see with the 686. And also, I noticed that the jello was back. All that jello that we'd worked so hard to get rid of is now back. So we're going to have to do some more testing with the jello and different camera mounts. But all in all, it is possible to mount the 686G camera on the X6 Tarantula. The last thing I want to do is, this is the pack we ran. I just kind of put a connector on here so we could test the voltage on it. And I want to see how unevenly the pack discharged, if at all. So what we'll do here is we'll take our multimeter and we will go across the two end terminals first, ground, and this will read the total pack voltage. We're at 7.43 volts. So 7.4 divided by 2 is 3.7. So let's see what the single cell reads. 3.7. Awesome. So that means that the little bit of draw that the camera has did not cause the pack to draw unevenly. It did, but whatever it was marginal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this battery and only use this battery when I use the FPV setup, just so I can do some long-term testing on battery life and how it is affecting the cells. Just so we have some real good data on whether or not this is a good idea to do or not. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, I'm just not ecstatic with the results. I mean, I'm happy that it's up and running. I'm happy we get powering the camera sorted out and out of the way. But I'm not happy with the static. It made it real difficult to fly. And I think it's some sort of an interference issue because it didn't start until I bound the transmitter to the quadcopter. So, I don't know if we move the FPV antenna and the quadcopter control antennas away from each other, if it will improve. If I get some time, I might go back to it and mess around with it some more. In the meantime, if anyone tries this setup out and gets it to work right and gets the static out of it, definitely let me know. I'd love to see it. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Definitely leave a comment down below. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.